don't want nothing. And it looks like that's what I'm gonna get. Sometimes I feel I need something. Taking my time and to ever forget about everything. Too much things running around in my brain, so come on, sweetness. Won't you help to ease my pain? Oh, love me, baby. Love me like I really mean it. Excuse me, mama. Then pinch me so I know I didn't dream it. I guess I do want something, but I can't seem to find it yet. Sometimes I feel like I'm nothing. You say I'm nothing you could ever forget. Well, that's just one thing. You said the kids were hanging on. Sometimes I could just scream. Baby, don't you do me wrong. I love you, darling. And you know that I love you.
Hey everyone, good morning. Welcome back to The Lookout. Today's July 26th. We're going to take a look at the Dragon Bravo fire. We're going to talk a little bit about the lightning that's going on in Northern California and give you an update on Butler fire. But mainly Dragon Bravo. Dragon Bravo. We've been reporting on this fire for a while now. And we're about almost a month into this fire, and things, as we said yesterday, are really not going great. The dragon refuses to behave, and this big fire is going to be a lot bigger before it's done, I think. This dragon needs to be rained on, become a rusty dragon. So it's going to jump kind of right into the maps, and then towards the end of the program, if you stick around, we're going to talk a little bit about, we just came out with a new park fire video yesterday. We got another one in the pipe. But for now, let's go to the dragon. All right, so Dragon Bravo, where is she? If you zoom out here on the north rim of the Grand Canyon, we've got Nevada over here, Utah over here, and Arizona. And on the north rim here, we've got the Dragon Bravo fire. And this fire, you can go back and watch our earlier videos, see how it's progressed. But the main thing that's happening right now is this fire is really, really active. And so what's new from yesterday's line here is in white. And so, yesterday the fire, what's been going on here was the fire started off down here, ran down here, burned down the Priceless Lodge, Grand Canyon Lodge, a bunch of structures down here. And then it's slowly kind of been now heading to the northeast under kind of prevailing southwesterly flow, which is super kind of common for this area. And firefighters lit a large firing operation off this kind of road here on the edge of the national park that divides the national park from wilderness area. About 4 days ago, three or 4 days ago, and kind of miraculously, they held this part of it. For the most part, there were some spots, but this whole part here, they didn't really have time. The fire kind of made a pretty aggressive run. Originally, they'd fired off this road probably a week ago, a little longer. That held for a little bit, but then the fire, with this kind of southwesterly flow, kind of squirted out over here. And then it made a big run, and they didn't have time with their firing operation out here to get enough depth. So the fire is now, like 8,000 acres or something, maybe not that much, but slopped into this wilderness area. And there's additional firing they did along this rim, likely to kind of manipulate the fire's intensity, trying to beat the fire to the fire. But kind of one of the kind of crazy things happening here kind of geographically is that the north rim up here is 9,000 feet, and then the desert out here is 6,000 feet. And we kind of know that like downsloping winds compress and fires can make really big. It's kind of like our Chinook winds here, but I'm sure a little bit different. But that anyway, the fire squirted on down. This is last night. Last night at midnight, the fire was on its way to the desert in a hurry, out in this wilderness area, and kind of what seemed likely to me after they've had a lot of focus on holding this north end here to keep the fire off the Kaibab, but it seems pretty obvious that out here in the wilderness, the fire is going to become established and kind of backdoor this whole operation, because you can see there's kind of there's scattered heat all out through here, kind of on the wrong side of their line. And this fire out here is burning uncontrolled with no real prospects for control. They'll drop on it with tankers and everything else. What you might see happen, which would be interesting, would be them firing this side of this road to keep it from going this way, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. But it seems like the fire wants to be on the Kaibab, whether the park and fire managers want it or not. The other big threat to kind of this northern perimeter is, and you see they were calling this yesterday the armpit, and talking about how this was going to fill in. I'm not sure if they've been helping it fill in or not. I'm getting most of my intel from the Facebook briefing that the team's putting out, and so I'm not sure exactly what they've been doing. The infrared and that stuff doesn't really show exactly like what they might have done out here to let this fill in by itself or do any firing. But the problem is that yesterday, in the past 36 hours, night before last, this is the white line is where the fire was, and the fire had kind of been hung up here on this meadow, and they knew that it was going to get around there basically. And so yeah, yesterday it squirted out of there and is headed north. So this fire is going to keep going this way. Seems like it's very unlikely that they're not going to have this. Their one tactic to keep that from going farther today would be to continue firing along the road here. But they're in kind of extreme dryness. They're in kind of critical fire weather, obviously. Anytime you see that like a fire gets up and runs like several miles in a short amount of time, like let's see how long this is. This fire ran like 3 miles yesterday afternoon. And so like if you're the fire behavior analyst on this team, your job is to look at what happened yesterday. And what we assume, kind of a real simple rule of thumb for fire behavior is if the fire did something yesterday and it's got the same fuels and topography available to it today and the same weather, it's going to do the same thing. So if we have anything, if we get the same winds and dryness and heat and everything else, it wouldn't be unreasonable for this fire to be pushing into the Kaibab by the end of this evening. So, firefighting out here, they're prepping out here at the Kaibab Lodge. They're doing a bunch of road prep out here. As we've talked about, fires in these dry desert kind of ecosystems they're driven by long-range spotting or even short-range spotting. One tree torches up, it's critically dry. If we look at the weather here, too many tabs, but our minimum relative humidity is 10 tomorrow, 11 today. It's like that is as dry as most places ever get. We're at almost 9,000 feet, so it's not going to be 105 degrees very often there. And it's cooling off at night, but the problem is at night the maximum RH is still in the 30s, and that's just not very dry. 30s is plenty dry. That's not very moist. You would hope like by Friday they're going to have a recovery of up to like 63 at night. Those end up being kind of like better like prescribed fire conditions. Like even in the 40s on the RH can be a good prescription for burning, underburning in pine. But they're dry, they're windy. Max gust today, 30 miles an hour. Sustained winds of 6. Max sustained wind today of 18 at noon coming from the south. This fire is just going to do what it wants to do. So I admire the kind of pluck of the team. They got the charismatic ops chief with the cowboy hat. But you get the feeling that the guy's kind of bullshitting you when he's like, everything went good today on the fire. We kind of, got our asses kicked here. We got our asses kicked there. We got our asses kicked over here too. But we made good progress. And then the fire just blows up on all flanks. And well, what are you going to say today? Oh, things are going pretty good out there. So I don't know, man, and I don't know about the cowboy hat. You know, like, yeah, I know you're in the Southwest and you're a federal employee or maybe you're a state employee. I don't know, but I want my ops chief to wear a ball cap. There's I don't know. There's something to being bullshitted by a guy in a cowboy hat versus a guy in a ball cap. Neither of them feel very good, but I'd rather get bullshitted by a guy in a ball cap. Thank you very much. Anyway, fire's doing its thing. We got lots more dragon jokes, dragon puns. The joke for today is it's a little hotshot humor that I learned from a excellent firefighter, and he said regarding firing operations, don't climb up the devil's asshole with a book of matches, and meaning that if you've got the most extreme fire behavior possible, critically dry, windy, everything else, firing operations are probably not going to work. You probably don't want to put more fire in the ground. And so I'd say that adage would also apply to dragons as well as the devil. Don't crawl up the devil's butthole with a book of matches, and don't do it with dragons either. Anyway, in that vein, they have continued to put fire on the ground. Out here, this is kind of the rim of the canyon, and you can see over the past few days, they've been lighting little dots of fire out here kind of around the rim. I think, I guess they probably aren't too worried about the fire burning down the canyon. And what they're trying to do here is they know that the fire's they don't have any way to control this fire. So I think they started off lighting along this road, thinking maybe they could hold it at that road. But the white is where they had fired kind of the day before yesterday. I think what they're doing here is putting fire into these stands of large pine to try to have them burn at a lower intensity before the main fire gets there to try to save them. And it might work, it might not. But so, yeah, they went and they lit aerial ignition out here kind of the day before yesterday maybe, letting the fire kind of hopefully back through here. I don't have real kind of clear operational intel there. Out here, I'm not sure if this was fired or not. We'd have to kind of go back and look. Yeah, so this got fired out here by them. I wondered, I saw a couple days ago, like kind of here out on the kind of east edge of the fire. I saw fire out there on the infrared a couple days ago. So they lit that on purpose, unless it was a spot from here, which I don't think is likely. And the idea there is it's backing off that ridge with the intention of kind of hopefully keeping the fire from racing into there. I think the only thing that's funky about that strategy is that fire's not going to race in there anyway because it's out on this plateau, and the fire's going to have to come out here and back in. So they have continued to run around out there with a helicopter or drone raining fire on the landscape. And as far as kind of whether or not that's going to work, let's look at, we had a satellite that went over yesterday, our favorite Sentinel satellite. And you can see out here, it's kind of patchy green. So maybe they did get it to burn under. Like you see that the areas that are kind of intense are the areas that are just kind of barren. So they might have pulled that off. You can see a lot of heat on here in the satellite image taken yesterday at noon. And that's mainly in the shrub. But it's dry. It's the middle of summer, and it's hella dry. So we'll kind of, forensically take a look at this stuff after the fire and see whether or not these places they put fire on purpose, did that change the outcome? It's kind of risky from a public relations standpoint, just in that, putting fire on the ground when fire's raging. But, they might have gotten some ecological effects. Like, there are kind of times that is really a valid technique to put fire on the ground, out in front of a fire. They know that the fire is going to burn out to here anyway. So they're like, well, let's put some fire there before the fire gets here. Maybe we have some control over it. But one thing that does is that you build a bunch of heat out here, and that affects the behavior of the rest of the fire. So adding heat to a hot, dry place that's already on fire at this scale is, it's got some liabilities. However, the people that are dropping the fire from the drones and the helicopters and stuff, like, they're highly experienced. I know some of them, and they've had so much experience with fire that I often think that it's just not completely untrained monkeys running around with torches, bent on destroying everything because they're maladjusted. So I'm glad it's not my call. I do wish that it was my job to be running that drone, because who wouldn't want that job? Anyway, fire's squirting out north. They're like, on the briefing, they're like, yeah, I think we're going to have a pretty good chance picking it up out here when it gets out in this easier country out here and this blah, 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 blah. So what's that mean? I don't know. Does that mean that we're going to, here's kind of one prediction is they're like, all right, we're out of the wilderness. We're going to fire off this road system here and box it in, because that's what we do as ops chiefs. That's one idea. And then my second prediction is that the day after that, it's going to look like this. Real fire-like. As we've said before, firing operations often advance the fire far ahead of where it was going to get before. Like, who knows? Maybe the wind will stop blowing. Maybe it'll rain. We don't know. But if you go out here and put this fire on the ground, you own it. You might contain the fire to a smaller size, but who cares? Like, this was a wildfire. It's burning a bunch of desert out in the middle of nowhere. Like, no one cares. But if you do go put a bunch of fire on the ground out there, and then I see that it burned all the way to the 89 road, we will be asking, like, were we better off because of this firing operation? As we've talked about a lot, there's a bias to action among firefighters. And that's what you would want in people that you're calling to respond to emergencies. That sometimes it's worth taking a tactical pause, let it do what it's going to do. That way, it's not yours. It's not your problem. It's already a problem. It's already bad. Let's not kill anyone. So our prediction, fire is going to haul ass up through here. We may see some firing operations to try to do something about it. They probably won't work. Fire's kind of coming from every direction. Oh, man. Anyway, that's the dragon, punk-ass dragon. Check out our essays. I decided to channel my inner Hunter H. Thompson and get a little more gonzo on some of the stuff, because some of the stuff is just, it's pretty ridiculous. Pretty ridiculous. Anyway, yeah, let's not kill anyone. Just to look a little more at the Sentinel imagery here. Fire effects on this fire in this last week have not been good, unless you're aspen. Like, hot burns at this elevation come back heavy in aspen, which is great for wildlife. And I think there's this conversation to have is that, like, hey, maybe ponderosa pine are on their way out in some of these places, and we may be kind of semi-powerless to. Bill Whitmer's got some audio issues. Anyone else having problems hearing me? Hope it's just Bill. There's bigger issues than I think the idea that we have much control over this type of scenario is problematic, right? Like, this fire, the fuels are ready, the landscape is what it is, and if you want to try to manage the landscape using fire might have other ideas of what it thinks the right thing is to do, which, who are we to say that we're holding on to this idea that ponderosa pine are like God's gift to nature and that we need to manage the landscape for them. things are changing. Climate's changing. Forests are changing. Maybe aspen are what we need here now. Anyway, resource benefit depends on who you ask. If you ask the deer, they'll probably be happy that there's lots of aspen. If you ask the tourists, they're going to say, hey, I drove through and from the road, it looks great. I can't barely even see it happen. Very few people are going to walk out there and be like, oh man, it's high severity and I feel this way or that way about it. So it's wildland, people. And we'll keep an eye on it, and we will see if what happens over here. I think the rate this fire is moving, like there's not much time for them to do anything about this with this big wind gust coming out of the south today. Like fire's gonna do what it wants to do out here. Eventually it'll run out of gas, it'll hit rock, and when you look at it, the fire is basically contained by the Grand Canyon on one side and some big Red Rock Desert up here and Red Rock Desert over there. It's going to do what it's going to do. I'm hoping that we don't just burn up the whole Kaibab. We need some rain. All right, so we'll jump over to Northern California here. It's been hella lightning-y. And let's go to the Butler fire. So I made a new video yesterday about the park fire. It's been a year since the park fire burned, and kind of been distracted by all this other forest fire action, and kind of hard to produce my park fire videos. But I found something randomly. I did an interview yesterday with an architect about Southern California, and when I opened up my Zoom folder to download that conversation, I found an interview I did with the Blue Dot Report last year, syndicated science program here, produced in Chico. And it's an hour of me waving my arms around talking about the science and technology and geography of the park fire. And I thought, well, that's a good starting point, So I mixed I've gotten a ton of footage from people over the last year of stuff they saw in the park fire. I've been out in the park fire a ton. I got a lot of maps and stuff I've made. So I mixed a lot of that stuff together with my monologue from the Blue Dot Report, and that's new on our website. We're going to do some more park fire videos, especially if things stay slow. But check that one out. Had fun doing it. I forget that these things take for days to make. All right, so coming back to Butler, the Orleans complex. Fire hasn't spread very much in the places that we care about. And this is fresh imagery from yesterday. So pretty much there's nothing new to report around Forks of Salmon as of last night. Fire hasn't really materially moved anywhere that threatens anything where people live. Fire does continue to kind of spread and fill out the box up in the Butler fire scar from 2013. But what I think is interesting here is we look at the severity imagery. The red areas here are the areas that burned hot. And this whole area got fired about a week ago with the idea of slowing down, reducing the potential for the fire to kind of get established here in Know Nothing Creek. And it looks like from the imagery, it looks like it just backed down kind of beautifully. Like, see if I can find my, there we go. So red areas are areas that burned hot, and green areas still have canopy. And you can see, as we've been talking about in here, that most of the red areas that burned hot are places that have burned hot in the past, that are shrub fields, oak thickets, and that places that had mature timber following the last fire in 2013 have generally fared well during this fire. So you do have some big pockets of high severity in this fire, but almost all of those are in places where it was brushed before the fire because fire burned uphill kind of through areas that burned hot when they had uphill runs 12 years ago. So in general, Butler kind of looks about like we expected it would for this. The patches of high severity match where we expected them to happen. Most of the old growth or trees that survived the last fire survived this fire too. So ecologically, it's about as good an outcome you could have hoped for. Socially, it's, the smoke has been difficult for folks. It hasn't been a real long duration fire as far as Klamath fires go. 3 weeks. It'll be a month when we're done. But so far so good. A lot of careful work went into this. There were some serious injuries. Firefighters over here on this line got hit by a tree. One of them's critically injured. I don't know if paralyzed or not, but critical spinal injury. The two other people I think are better. There's a GoFundMe for the firefighter that did get injured that you can find through hotshot groups on Facebook. But this is fire on fire, right? And as we've been talking about, these areas that have burned need to burn again in a kind of reasonable interval to avoid turning into thickets where you lose all the big old trees. So if you want to learn more about this fire, if you're just joining us with our coverage, you can go back and look at stuff we did in the last 2 weeks about it and why it was getting managed that way. And check out our interview with Will Harling, who lives right here at the fire, basically, who had a lot of good background information. These goofballs. So yeah, check out the lookout. We got our essay here on the Punk S Dragon Fire. We got our video about responding to super sketchy architecture. We're following up on that with talking to some real architects, so it's not just us making stuff up. And check out our sponsors while you're there. Appreciate everyone's support. And but do check out our new video. This one. Like it. Glad. Now I'm tired. Stayed up late making it. So thank y'all. And we'll be reporting this lightning. Just to wrap up, the lightning that's going on. Right now we're Northern California. We're kind of right in the middle of this little low. Nice dramatic kind of cool, moist weather for most of Northern California. Lots of lightning. But when you look at kind of the conditions out here, like up around Lake Almanor right now, humidities are all over 60%, 70% some places. Temperatures are low, 60s and 70s. Winds aren't super severe, so pretty good odds that if we do have new starts, that unless we have hundreds of them, they're probably going to get put out. We're really not in critical fire conditions at all for Northern California right now. We also, if we look at our flammability charts, like fuel flammability in Northern California is below average right now. So yeah, lots of lightning. It will start some fires. Some of them may grow, but right now we're not in a super critical picture for lightning in Northern California starting. Fires are going to be terrible right away. If we have a bunch of starts, some of them are going to get away. There's one fire that is burning here up by Tule Lake, the Mammoth Fire, which is now closer to 3,000 acres, I think. But this area, this is lightning's home, the Modoc, and it is what it is. Got a lot of rain with these storms. One thing that might change today is the storms are going to start moving a little faster. And so faster moving storms, oftentimes with a faster moving storm, the lightning, the rain outruns the lightning. So you can get strikes outside of the rain cores when the storms move faster. So it's going to be lightningy, but we'll keep you posted. Have a good weekend, everyone. Thanks.